Every WWF event, from WrestleMania to the weekly Raw is War, would be jam-packed with big moments during the legendary Attitude Era. So here are a selection of memorable, after being reminded, moments from that very era that make you say, oh yeah, that happened. I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 incredible WWE Attitude Era moments nobody ever talks about. Number 10, the American Badass cometh. Whenever the character started to get a bit stale, The Undertaker reinvented himself and came back bigger and better, baby. And the biggest evolution of the character was the American Badass change-up in mid-2000. Except that's not quite when it happened, actually. Though this new version of The Undertaker rode into Judgment Day's main event, following a series of cryptic promos in the weeks preceding the pay-per-view, this wasn't his debut. Taker had actually started embodying this persona the previous summer, just as he was about to take a hiatus from WWE. His demeanor and voice shifted from a rarely heard stoic religious fanatic speaking in tongues to an old school Texan ripping rivals a new one on commentary. His attire also switched up towards the end of his 1999 run, as he began appearing in backstage and promo segments in what would become the now classic bandana, sunglasses and leather jacket combination. Taker's appearances as this proto-American badass looked to be more at home in a biker bar than a funeral parlor, and signaled a shift in the character that paralleled the company as a zeitgeist for American culture. Number 9, doing business the right effing way. In April 2000, Mike Awesome, who had been with ECW periodically since its inception, suddenly appeared on rival WCW programming. His decision to jump ship stemmed from the simple fact that he was now owed a significant amount of overdue wages by Paul Heyman. The only issue was that Awesome was the ECW champion at the time. WCW had tried to get Awesome to wear the championship belt on their programming, but Heyman signed an injunction preventing it. However, WCW could refer to Awesome as the ECW champion on air. Heyman, who was secretly in cahoots with Vince McMahon at the time, requested for Taz to return on loan and beat Awesome for the title. This all led to an unusual one-off scenario whereby a then WWE wrestler faced a then WCW wrestler for the ECW championship. I know, madness. During a short, seemingly spontaneous and barely covered matchup, Taz regained the ECW championship. Following the bell, Awesome jumped the guardrail and aggressed from the arena. Taz's reign would only last 10 days, during which he appeared on WWE with the belt to face then WWE champion Triple H, before dropping it to Tommy Dreamer at CyberSlam 2000. Number 8, Shane McMahon's fall. At 2000's SummerSlam, Shane McMahon was set to defend the WWF Hardcore Championship against the Lethal Weapon Steve Blackman. As the match drew to a close, the cowardly McMahon attempted to escape by climbing 50 feet up the entrance structure. Blackman chased, whacked the champ across the back with a cane, as you do, and sent Shane crashing down through the stage. Blackman then followed with an elbow drop and scored the win. The image of McMahon falling was featured on WWE television repeatedly for the rest of that year. It wouldn't be until the following WrestleMania that Shane O'Mac would return to the ring. Shortly after, during Backlash, he would actually repeat the SummerSlam leap of faith from a higher structure in a non-title last man standing match against The Big Show. This time he wasn't falling, Shane McMahon bloody jumped. But whilst the SummerSlam fall was routinely repeated, the Backlash elbow drop was barely ever mentioned again. Number 7, blood but no fire. At King of the Ring 1998, and within a year of his explosive debut, Kane would get a shot at the WWF Championship, facing the company's biggest star, Stone Cold Steve Austin, in a first blood match. The rules were that the combatant who made his opponent bleed from the face or the mouth would be crowned the winner, and thus the new champion. This stacked the odds against Austin, as Kane's attire covered all but his left hand. So confident was the challenger that Kane even promised he would set himself on fire should he lose. That's a confident Charlie right there. The matchup itself was pretty good. Austin was ridiculously over with the crowd, and fans needed to know how he could win, or if Kane's promise would be acted upon. However, after a wayward chair shot from the interfering Undertaker connected with Stone Cold's forehead, busting him open, the bell was rung. Kane's first championship reign had begun. So why isn't this pivotal big red moment so well remembered for its build, drama and execution? Well, unfortunately for the main eventers of the evening, their contest followed that very infamous Hell in a Cell match between the Undertaker and Mankind. Plus, less than 24 hours later, Austin regained the championship. So much for that then. Number 6, Free Radicals. On Unfortunately, Chris Benoit's wrestling history is intertwined with stars that really do deserve being mentioned, so fans cannot ignore him completely. With fellow Radicals Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, and the late great Eddie Guerrero, there is no denying that he and they were involved in some classic moments during the second half of the Attitude Era. The group grew through ECW and joined WCW. However, they felt they were not showcased well in their new home. Before long, all four men decided enough was enough, and that it was time to head to the rival WWE. In order to keep him, Kevin Sullivan booked for the vacant WCW Heavyweight Championship belt to go around Benoit's waist at Sold Out in early 2000. However, despite Benoit beating fellow challenger Sid Vicious, the Radicals left anyway, in a rare reversal of someone taking a championship from WCW to WWE. It was mentioned on WWE programming that Benoit was debuting as the reigning WCW Heavyweight Champion, but Sullivan tried to have it downplayed on Nitro, even having the commentators say that Vicious never lost the match due to a previously unrecognized rope break. At the end of the day, the Radicals made such a big impression on WWE audiences that Benoit's championship didn't really matter, and so a rare defection of the WCW champion and a taste of their own medicine just went unnoticed. Number 5, I think you know the guy. Whilst WWE fans will often look to the fan favourite of Mankind being Mick Foley's most popular persona, the masked boiler room dweller is only his most recent. Foley's earliest incarnation was Dude Love, but the character he portrayed in ring for the longest time was Cactus Jack, and Foley actually brought Cactus Jack back to face Triple H in autumn of 1997 in WWE. And as the Attitude Era matured WWE's content, Cactus Jack would make a few more sporadic appearances. However, the veteran Foley still seemed to hold back somewhat on the violence. That was until early 2000 when, having been fired, rehired, and then beaten up, Mankind ditched the mask and unveiled the psychotic persona once more. Though we had only seen him mere months previously, Mick Foley would cement the true return of Cactus Jack in a subtle yet brilliant promo on the following SmackDown. Triple H looked like he'd seen a ghost, and Foley acted like this was someone WWE audiences had never seen. Unlike his previous incarnation of the same character, this was the real King of the Deathmatch, the real hardcore legend, the real Cactus Jack. Number 4, Rikishi's Death Drop. No one would have imagined that the steel cage match at Fully Loaded 2000 for the Intercontinental Championship would have been the time and place that Rikishi would reenact the moment Jimmy Superfly Snuka dived from the top of a steel cage onto a prone Don Muraco at Madison Square Garden in 1983. Despite the devastating force of the big man landing on him, Val Venus was still able to retain the Intercontinental Championship, albeit with a little help from Taz. Not longer after this slobber knocker, the ever-popular Rikishi turned heel, admitting that he was the person who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin the previous year. We all know who he did it for. After a program with the Great One, he was put into the 6-man Hell in a Cell match at the Armageddon pay-per-view. As was tradition for Hell in a Cell matches of the Attitude Era, in other words, they were nuts, someone was going to have to take the fall off the top / side / through the cage to the announcer's table / ring / random truck parked in the entranceway. Since Mick Foley was temporarily retired, that responsibility fell to the only other person with a history of cage diving. One Undertaker chokeslam off the top later, and another Rikishi fall was complete. Strangely, these two moments seem to overshadow each other. Fans will either point to Rikishi's fully loaded dive or the Armageddon chokeslam as the more impressive. You let me know which one you prefer in the comment section below, my friends. Number 3, it's time for me to do what I have to do. Within a week of the Montreal Screwjob, all of the Hart dynasty except Owen were gone from WWE. Contractual obligations meant that the youngest Hart was stuck to work for a company that had disrespected his brother and his family's legacy in his own country. But while Owen took a few weeks off, the crowd's anticipation over his return grew. Post Survivor Series, he was more over than ever before. With the crowd firmly behind him and the lines between reality and wrestling kayfabe blurred, Hart used the real-life heat to declare that he was no longer holding back. The Rocket Owen Hart was no more. He was now the sole survivor, and he was out for revenge. The opportunity would come at the last Raw of 1997, in a title match against the people who'd stolen the WWE Championship from his brother. But despite how over Owen was, Shawn Michaels was not to drop the belt to another Hart. Following some outside interference from Triple H, Owen Hart's push was simultaneously ended, and he was put into a mid-card non-starter rivalry over the European Championship. Number 2, try lacing my boots. In 1997, fans had begun cheering for the bad guys. Heels like Stone Cold Steve Steve Austin were being turned face by the crowd's reaction to their anti-establishment behavior. Whilst fans debate that the tonal shift of WWE was born from the anarchy of ECW or the fourth wall breaks in WCW, Vince McMahon knew that he had to take ownership of this change in audience tastes. McMahon crafted a vignette in which his wrestlers would call out the perception of sports entertainers being non-athletes and wrestling not being real. This would end with the WWF champion daring those who harbour such thoughts to try lacing his boots. At the time, that was Bret the Hitman Hart. The trailer was to kick off the new Attitude Era, announcing that WWE would now be more adult-oriented entertainment. The historic announcement was set to be broadcast prior to the main event of Survivor Series 97. The problem was that the main event ended with the Montreal Screwjob. After the events of that night, no one really remembered about the video announcing its arrival. To most, it appeared that the Attitude Era was a product of the situation, when it had actually been planned all along. Number 1. The Corporate Champ. While Survivor Series 1997 is remembered for the Montreal Screwjob, the following year's event is most memorable for awarding The Rock his first WWE Championship reign in the exact same way. Mick Foley also went on to benefit from this event, gaining his first title win in the aftermath. But ultimately, Survivor Series would prove to be a true zeitgeist of the state of wrestling at the time. The event itself was held in November and retrospectively showcased how much of a revolving door of talent the Monday Night War had made WWE. In the build-up to the event, there were multiple returns to the company from WCW. Steven Regal had technically returned earlier that year, but his spells in rehab meant that he did not participate as a full-time wrestler until the month prior to Survivor Series. Attacking X-Pac, Regal debuted his Real Man's Man gimmick and began a chase for the European Championship. The Big Boss Man, who had left WWE a few years previously, also returned in the October before Survivor Series, showcasing a new look and darker gimmick. Survivor Series 1998 also holds the distinction of being Mark Merrow's final US pay-per-view appearance. Merrow, who had been touted as a huge star, left WWE less than 1 month later and never returned to wrestling full-time. But most people simply remember this night as the one that boasted the Screwjob 2.0. Now sure, everyone understandably loves reminiscing about things like the legendary Eddie Guerrero winning the big one, the rise of Batista, Brock Lesnar and John Cena, and Trish Stratus and Lita main eventing Monday Night Raw. But what about those other magnificent, scarcely believable and often quite deranged occurrences this balmy, ruthless aggression era had to offer? Those ones that folks have largely just forgotten about, or maybe don't talk about as much. Well, have we got the list for you, baby? Because from the minds of both myself and the great Michael Sidgwick, here are 20 incredible WWE ruthless aggression era moments that nobody ever talks about. Number 20, the John Cena versus Great Khali feud. So before we get started, the period that we're going to cover here is between 2002 and 2008, because that's what people tend to think of when they think of the ruthless aggression era, so that's what we're going to do. Now we've got that out of the way, ruthless aggression poster boy John Cena entered improbably awesome performances at Judgment Day and One Night Stand in 2007. Somehow, through his motivation, Arn Anderson's layouts, or perhaps a mystical force from up high, the man carried the Great Khali to something compelling and dynamic. Twice! Now, the Judgment Day main event wasn't necessarily good. Cena's opening barrage of punches made Shane McMahon look like Sugar Ray Robinson, for crying out loud, but it was inordinately effective. Cena at least threw himself down to the mat with a motivated snap. He knew that he had to create movement and some nightmarish oral thuds to get this over. Khali played his role remarkably well too, aiming his awful strikes at Cena's ears and even lifting his leg higher than he ever had in his life to connect with a back kick. It was majestic. The One Night Stand match was even better. An arena-wide brawl, it was significantly less tropey than many plunder matches WWE presents today. Virtually every single weapon that was used, like cameras and the crane, actually belonged in that environment, making it feel like a desperate Cena was grabbing whatever he could get his hands on to survive this onslaught. It was great stuff. Number 19, Velocity going nuts. Now, while the main roster was infested during ruthless aggression with some of the worst, greenest, most generic developmental atrocities you'll ever see, WWE did very gently flirt with the stylistic revolution on the nascent independent circuit. They signed Paul London, a fantastic, now severely underrated wrestler. He was super talented, but also handsome and telegenic, and thus, in the eyes of WWE and its soapy approach, more marketable than the rest. They still stuck him on C-Show Velocity and had him feud with Akio for ages though. WWE did not care about those matches, but the wrestlers did. They worked in vain, but treated every last one as an opportunity. Hypersonic aerial battles worked at a pace so blistering you could scarcely believe they were held under the WWE banner. This series wasn't just an exhibition of moves. A lot of thought went into it. In one match, Akio caught a London kick and sent him flying with a backflip. Now usually this kind of counter only happens to allow the opponent to land on their feet and mount another attack. It's athletically impressive, but a bit contrived. This right here though was an actual attack. London bumped legs first on the ropes and then on his head with a horrific and rather awesome corkscrew motion. And more wrestlers should apply this level of intent to their work today, if you ask me. Number 18, one of the sickest matches ever. If Roderick Strong ever had cause to strangle out somebody's name, it wasn't when he was seeking the affections of Adam Cole. It was when he was getting pummeled half to death by Kurt Angle. Before he made a name for himself in Ring of Honor and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, Roderick Strong was sacrificed to Kurt Angle as part of the latter's gold medal invitational. If the inexperienced chancer could survive 3 minutes with Angle, he'd take the gold. Angle asked Strong what his chances were. Strong said he didn't know, but he did know that he could slap Angle right in the face. And he did, really hard. This incensed Angle, who chased Strong around the ring. When they met inside of it for 2 glorious minutes, they may well have worked the most violent match in WWE history. And that's no exaggeration, folks. Angle worked this match like it was a shoot. Even by his standards, his intensity was just disgusting. After an absolutely fantastic near fall, the red mist descended further when Angle came close to losing. He smashed Strong repeatedly in the back of the head after furiously paintbrushing his face with slaps. The closest wrestling ever got to the hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby meme. Angle battered the back of Strong's skull so viciously that it's a miracle his forearm wasn't covered in brain matter. Angle then held Strong in a cattle mutilation position before headbutting his skull, grinding his forehead on it, and then eating it. The man was unhinged. Thick platelets of blood somehow didn't pool on the canvas. A disgusting suplex and ankle lock later, and the massacre was done. Except it wasn't, since Angle hooked the ankle and refused to let go. How did this make it onto WWE TV? And while we're talking about sick matches, I want to know right now, what do you think's the sickest match that you have ever seen on television? You let me know in the comment section down below. It's gonna take something pretty special to top that. Number 17, the 2005 pay-per-view streak. 2004 and 2006 were amongst the worst years in WWE history. Some of the pay-per-views, I mean, geez. People do not exaggerate when they say how WCW dying killed the industry. The talent pool was a stream of polluted storm water heading straight into the drain. It was bleak, man. It was the Spirit Squad and the Dudley Boys with not a table in sight headlining pay-per-views bleak. 2005, though, was infinitely better. The promotion was still desperate to chase Attitude Era buzz and controversy, manifesting in the awful Muhammad Hassan character and the unspeakable angle that led to his write-off. But bloody hell, the April to June 5-in-a-row pay-per-view streak was, at the time, the best run in the history of the promotion. Shawn Michaels bringing out the most disturbing, vengeful version of Kurt Angle by showcasing his own amateur wrestling credentials, highlighted a WrestleMania 21 that was forward-thinking even at its most mid. Backlash was a bit more shaky, but Batista proved his staying power in a superior main event sequel. Judgment Day promoted one of the sickest over-deliveries in WWE history with that gruesome John Cena versus JBL I Quit headliner. The first one-night stand was astonishingly great and authentic. It was just unfathomably special. And then Vengeance remains to this day nothing less than an all-timer, with Shawn and Kurt creating magic yet again, and Cena and Batista atoning for their not great Mania performances with a pair of rippers. Number 16, Triple H and Ric Flair blow the roof off Survivor Series. The worst thing about Triple H in his reign of terror wasn't that he was boring, although he was slow, dull, and somehow smug with it. No, the worst thing was the sabotage. He made Scott Steiner look awful. He took 23 seconds to pin Booker T in what looked like a parody of the Gotta Crawl to Protect My Finish near fall spot before racism actually won. He decided to work Goldberg like he was training him on his first day at Ohio Valley Wrestling. And one of Goldberg's nuts might as well have been hanging out for what it did for his aura. But if Triple H liked or even respected you, well, you had a half chance of not looking like a complete has-been know-nothing loser. And, well, he liked Ric Flair. Now, you think that Flair and Trips going 27 minutes might be a nightmarish experience, but it was actually superb and well worth the runtime. It might shock you to learn that Flair, at 56 years years old, was really quite good at convincing people that he could not stand up under his own power. I know, I'm just as surprised as you are. That very real triumph drove the remarkable tension of a hidden classic. And Triple H was outstanding when he wanted to be. He was a precision killer in there. And in one awesome spot, he blasted Flair caked in blood on the floor with a spinebuster. Flair's back was wrecked in his mid-20s and he looked about 90 in Detroit that night. This felt like transgressive, dangerous, terrifying pro wrestling. Something Cody Rhodes might have studied ahead of AEW Double or Nothing 2019. Who knows? Number 15, Edge's Ric Flair impersonation skit. This one barely gets remembered for two reasons. Number 1, the D-Generation X Nation of Domination and New World Order 4 Horsemen sketches were far more infamous. And number 2, it's now difficult to recall a time in which Edge actually had patter. He plays a super intense and somewhat corny, vengeful badass these days to mixed results. He still has the odd one-liner in him, sure, but he's mostly known for his forehead vein now, as am I. Back in 2005 though, as the rated R superstar, he mocked Ric Flair's very real arrest for grabbing somebody by the throat in a road rage incident. While charges against Flair were eventually dropped when the witness to the assault failed to appear in court, that did not stop Edge from sending Flair up. The use of juxtaposition was brilliant. WWE could not have found a more bleak stretch of grey road, nor filmed on a more overcast day, as Edge, dressed as Flair, drove around in full gimmick. WWE, inadvertently perhaps, cast Flair as a total loser, whose tall tales of the glamorous travelling life were rather pathetic. Edge played it a bit like Shawn Michaels doing Hulk Hogan, every other word out of his mouth being woo, and in a great daft touch, instead of choking the victim, this Flair just chopped him. Number 4, Shawn Michaels and Triple H did have chemistry. Shawn Michaels and Triple H worked one great match together. Their SummerSlam 2002 war was a gripping, basic story elevated by Shawn's masterful selling. But elsewhere, they really took the PISS, didn't they? There are few things worse than a wrestling match that tries too hard to be good, to be worthy. At Bad Blood 2004, Shawn and Triple H went nearly 50 minutes in Hell in a Cell. It might be the most pretentious match of all time. They took a core idea. The spaces between the moves matter more than the moves themselves, and tried to be profound by lying around and doing absolutely nothing. The exhaustion was meant to reach the people, and oh, it did, but not in the way intended. The crowd was just bored to death. It says something about the absolute state of WWE in 2004, that, short of better options, fans actually voted for a rematch at Taboo Tuesday. Their bleak resignation was rewarded with a tighter, less masturbatory effort, which, while still not exactly a classic, was basically SummerSlam 2002, this time Shawn selling his leg. What a sequel. In this current era of content-forward wrestling, a lot of modern guys should probably study how to actually work through a storyline injury, or just watch some Shawn Michaels matches, because this guy could do it. Michaels didn't just explode into a move and then clutch at his leg, he wrestled as if it was hanging off. The whole thing, mirroring his opponent's assaulted quad tears, looked like a match that a wrestler forced himself to gut through when he was hurt for real. That's how good Michaels was, baby. Number 13, this incredible Shawn Michaels facial. Shawn Michaels played heel against Hulk Hogan in their incredible 2005 series, and driven with pure defiance, he hammed it up in a bid to embarrass his rival for Hogan's sheer temerity throughout the creative process. It was magic. Michaels wasn't merely being his old, brash self. He channeled the cutthroat shark of old, the guy who'd commit character assassinations just to get to the very top. He made Hogan look like a cringeworthy relic, a megalomaniac covered in wrinkly oil he called skin. It was fascinating, cathartic, and Michaels was simply so awesome in the 2000s that he made the parody of wrestling that was the SummerSlam main event feel, well, real. In a slightly less famous throwback to the old Shawn, though, Michaels executed the greatest fake-out in pro wrestling history when playing, since he had no choice, situational heel in Montreal. Less famous than his parody of Hogan, but far more scathing. When Bret Hart's music started playing in that arena, the place went absolutely nuts, and Michaels was priceless on the cell. He looked absolutely dumbfounded. He'd seen a ghost, and it wasn't a deer that he'd blasted to Kingdom Come returning to haunt him. It was Bret! Except it wasn't, and he just pissed himself laughing. Everyone was furious. It was great. It was great. Number 12, the best wrestling wedding ever. You might think wrestling fans are a bit of a nasty bunch. Some of them will call you terrible names for saying that an acclaimed wrestler might have one or two flaws to their game. Some of them will abuse you in your DMs for preferring one wrestling promotion promotion to another. And yet they must be a bunch of softies deep down, because historically they tune into a wrestling wedding in their droves. Weddings are invariably a ratings hit, and the very best of the lot might well have happened in 2007. SmackDown general manager Teddy Long became besotted with Crystal, and the two were engaged very swiftly. And the ceremony was, well, it was just incredible. Jagged Edge were hired as the wedding band, and their song Let's Get Married was an absolute delight. Now yes, a lot of the gags were a bit stupid. Crystal fell over her dress, Jillian Hall interrupted to sing a song of her own, but this knew exactly what it was. And Teddy's selling of his unfortunately timed cardiac arrest was brilliantly stupid and overacted. Now there's a sentence. Number 11, just how great WrestleMania 24 was. Now people obviously talk about WrestleMania 24, it was a WrestleMania event, but they don't talk about it as one of the best ever. They should though. X7 gets the most praise for its range, its quality, its incredible scale. 19 is fondly remembered as an Attitude Era redux of sorts that peaked incredibly high across its demented Mr. McMahon theater, emotive Rock vs. Austin finale, and awesome pure wrestling in Shawn Michaels vs. Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle vs. Brock Lesnar. 3 and 5 boasted Hulk Hogan's most famous matches. 10 has the highest peaks. People rave about 31. 39 was one finish away from rivaling X7, and 40 was ace too. But 24 is probably the second best Mania ever. Yeah, I said it. The range was almost as impressive as X7, missing just one technical classic. That's it. That's all it's missing. The JBL vs. Finlay Belfast Brawl was thudding black comedy that didn't overstay its welcome. The Money in the Bank match, while not a genre masterpiece, was still incredibly exciting and dangerous. Ric Flair vs. Shawn Michaels was as emotional a match as WWE has ever promoted, told with a unique take on the babyface versus heel dynamic. Floyd Mayweather vs. The Big Show was an absolute riot of a celebrity match, and the Edge vs. Undertaker main event was vintage big match drama elevated by Edge's counter-fueled brilliance in how he always had an answer to the unsolvable puzzle until, well, he didn't. Short on filler, WrestleMania 24 was a complete experience that absolutely flew by. Even the uninspiring Triple H vs. John Cena vs. Randy Orton WWE title match recognized that the three players had dominated that scene for what felt like forever, and instead of taking the piss, just got on with its unfussy, pulsating 14 minutes. And that's all we needed. Cheers for checking out this WhatCulture Wrestling video today, you awesome person you. Now hit that subscribe button and you will get more of this WhatCulture Wrestling stuff in your life. Now back to the video. Number 10, MVP is coming. Many moons before he was managing the likes of the Hurt Business and Omos, Montel Vontavious Porter debuted on WWE TV as a hot free agent in August 2006. It wasn't long before the arrogant new heel found himself being signed to a big old deal on Teddy Long's SmackDown. And once the ink had dried on that lucrative contract, MVP only went and unleashed one of the most ridiculous and wonderfully heelish entrances of the era, demanding an inflatable tunnel with his moniker stamped on the front be shoved onto the ramp before he made his grand arrival. The star would then strut out of the outrageous blow-up tent and trigger an excessive amount of pyro out of some nearby MVP stickered boxes. It was just all kinds of dumb and unnecessary, but it only helped enhance an already full of himself character and made the annoying newcomer feel like a bit of a big deal out of the gate actually. And MVP himself may not have been a big fan of his entrance tune back in the day, but the former United States champion bursting through that tunnel with a chip on his shoulder to the sound of "I'm coming" was definitely one of the more underrated entrances of the time, especially his incredible debut arrival at No Mercy 2006. Number 9, Big Show and JBL being hit by tranquilizer darts. So incredible has two meanings, of course. It can be used to describe an amazing, magnificent thing, or something that's just, well, a bit unbelievable. And this weird, often forgotten entry falls into the latter category, and not in a good way. 2 years before MVP's official debut match at No Mercy 2006, a certain newly bald giant collided with a wrestling machine at that same pay-per-view. But do you remember how the monstrous Big Show ended up having his hair clipped off? Well, if not, then let me remind you. A few weeks before Show and Kurt clashed at the event, the latter decided to embarrass his gigantic adversary on SmackDown. After watching a video involving a gorilla being shot with a tranquilizer dart, the big lad thought it would be a wonderful idea to incorporate that balmy concept into his feud with the Olympic gold medalist. Only after being advised by a cruel Vince McMahon to pump said gun a few too many times, Angle ended up nearly firing the dart right through his pay-per-view rival before chopping off the balding star's locks. It's a properly mad sad moment, and one that has somehow managed to go under many a fan's radar, and hasn't been mentioned as much as it probably should have been in the years since. But the incredibly surreal, tranquilizing times weren't over by a long shot, folks. Fast forward a few months, and that same tranquilizer gun was being accidentally fired at JBL's ass on the Blue Show, with Amy Weber pulling the trigger during that taping in Japan. A night that also saw the then WWE champion awkwardly beat up an inflatable dinosaur in the middle of the squared circle. Childish boss Vince McMahon evidently got a kick out of all of this woozy silliness, whereas those few fans who do actually remember watching the latter uncomfortable and absurd segment in particular go down probably just wish they'd been on the receiving end of the weapon. Maybe there's a reason we don't talk about this. Number 8, Chris Jericho drops a stone cold beverage. As this list will highlight again before its end, it didn't matter that the Texas Rattlesnake wasn't quite the same badass SOB that folks had enjoyed throughout the Attitude Era. Stone Cold Steve Austin still found a way to more than make his mark on the time of ruthless aggression too. And one of the largely forgotten Stone Cold hidden gems from this era occurred back after the August 25th, 2003 edition of Monday Night Raw. Both Austin and his Broken Skull Sessions guest at the time, Chris Jericho, recalled the rarely revisited moment of post-show fun back in 2021, with the former AEW World Champion noting how his call to accidentally botch his catching of a Stone Cold beer was completely made up on the spot. What came next was one of both Attitude Era icons' funnier moments within a WWE ring, as Austin glared through Y2J's skull after Jericho failed to grab the incoming beverage again, to the sound of thousands of chuckles. It's a relatively small exchange, and one that wasn't designed to do anything other than briefly pop both Austin and the rest of the folks crammed inside the arena that night. But watching two masters of their craft effortlessly conduct an audience through some marvelously simple physical comedy will always be incredible to watch. Number 7, Stone Cold refs the Animal versus the Dead Man. Now easily the most memorable / infamous match this special guest bionic redneck found himself in the middle of during the period that followed John Cena screaming ruthless aggression went down at WrestleMania 20, of course. But while that contest was hijacked by a crowd who had zero interest in cheering on the monsters heading for the WWE exit doors, there was actually another occasion when Austin ended up reffing another somewhat incredible clash of the Titans. Going down on the 2007 edition of Cyber Sunday, Stone Cold ended up being chosen as the special ref for the latest chapter in Batista and Undertaker's modern classic of a rivalry. And there is an argument to be made for this often overlooked World Heavyweight Championship showdown being the best of the two SmackDown megastars' many battles that year, after Austin had already stunned fellow refereeing options JBL and Mick Foley out of the building. Taker and Animal at the top of their games proceeded to brutally knock lumps out of one another for 17 minutes. Those in attendance sunk their teeth into a collection of epic near falls, with Batista's kicking out of the last ride and the Phenoms surviving of the first Batista bomb, causing 10,000 fans to sound like 100,000. Not even the Dead Man could survive a second explosive powerbomb though, as Austin enjoyed a relatively stress-free but still unquestionably thrilling day at the office. Crack a beer, man, you've earned it. Number 6, Snoop's first WrestleMania beatdown. Now this global treasure may have popped up in the wrestling business on several magical and often absurd occasions over the years, but one of his most bizarre appearances in this industry, and a rarely discussed one, actually went down during the Ruthless Aggression era. Hopping back to the 24th show of shows now, Snoop Dogg took on the role of Master of Ceremonies for a tag contest that involved Ashley Mazzaro and Maria Kanellis taking on Molina and Beth Phoenix. More on those two later. Oh, and this wasn't just any 2-on-2 match, folks. It was a Playboy Bunny Mania Lumberjill bout, because of course it was. As expected, the entire thing was little more than a way to show off the bodies of the then divas grappling within the division at the time, all while Jerry Lawler predictably and rather awkwardly drooled over the action on commentary. There was one positive to be found amongst the forgettable 5-minute double showing though, one that played out in darkness for 2 of those due to an also quite incredible lights malfunction, in response to a despicable Santino Marella costing Maria the match. That horny hero, Lawler, and an angry Snoop decked the Italian. The fact those moments and the visual of Snoop engaging in a never-ending snog with Kanellis post-match largely overshadow both the contest itself and the results are just a few of the reasons this incredibly awkward bit of business is rarely spoken about today. Number 5, a rather underrated and brutal ladder war. Few would be quick to remember this specific ladder war when the words Hardy Boys or One Night Stand are thrown their way, but in what was unquestionably one of the most underrated 2-on-2 clashes of the Ruthless Aggression time period, Matt and Jeff put on a pretty violent show opposite the world's greatest tag team at the 2007 event. Now, the Hardy Boys have obviously been involved in far more extreme, electric, and iconic ladder wars than this one on the one night of the year that WWE attempted to go fully hardcore. However, not enough love has been shown to this gritty and inevitably inventive World Tag Team Championship fight over the years. From the poetry in motion ladder sandwich to a fearless Shelton Benjamin's willingness to test just how many metal bumps his battered back could take, to one of the nastier ladder suplexes you're ever gonna see from Jeff to Charlie Haas. Both units were determined to steal the night, and they ultimately did exactly that, with the visual of Benjamin very nearly snapping his leg in two, eliciting a deafening roar from the crowd, as the Hardys sent the twosome tumbling to their doom on their way to successfully defending their straps. Now give it a watch and go and talk about it. Number 4, Simon Dean bites off more than he can chew. The Doctor of Thugonomics, the rated R superstar, the Hurricane. The Ruthless Aggression era definitely boasted its fair share of fondly remembered gimmicks, but away from those far more regularly discussed characters found wandering around SmackDown Fists and the giant Monday Night Titantron, there was another wonderful personality that likely deserved more success than it ultimately experienced, generating all kinds of heat by blasting the folks watching on for their decision to scoff nachos over protein bars, watching the easy-to-despise fitness freak that was Simon Dean get battered by various top stars after trying to cram his Simon system down viewers' throats was a joy. And while some may actually be able to recall that amusing time the Animal tried some of his product before completely annihilating the cocky purple sweatsuited heel, arguably Dean's finest hour actually came on the April 4th, 2005 edition of Raw. After being rudely interrupted by that man again, the Texas Rattlesnake, Dean brilliantly squirmed his way through a never-ending series of stone-cold ordered push-ups. Then, in the wake of Maven inadvertently giving Austin a protein shower, an almighty can of whoop-ass was opened up on both as the Raw after WrestleMania 21 crowd went wild. The gimmick definitely rubbed folks up the wrong way, acted as the perfect foil for WWE's badass babyfaces, and was easily one of the most underrated comedy acts of the 2000s, before Dean finally left the company in 2007. Number 3, the ambulance epic that followed the testicle electrocution. The Big Red Machine was involved in some of the most disturbing and infamous moments this entire era had to offer, even before he locked eyes on Lita and helped kick off one of the most unsettling storylines in WWE history. The newly unmasked Kane had begun causing rather creepy and ridiculous chaos on Monday nights, targeting the McMahon family not long after setting Jim Ross on fire. This all ultimately led to Shane O'Mac feuding with The Undertaker's burned-up brother, in the wake of Linda being tombstoned by the Madman. Yep, that happened. And it was during this program when the son of the boss memorably wound up having his testicles electrocuted on national television. What a time. What is rarely discussed when looking back on this consistently balmy feud, however, is the absolute banger of an ambulance contest that closed out this never-ending war. At Survivor Series, the longtime rivals viciously battered one another around the arena, rammed cars into one another, and Shane even unleashed an ambulance-assisted coast-to-coast on the sinister big man. Now, it's not hard to understand why one of the strongest ambulance matches in WWE history is rarely referenced when talking about this routinely shocking Ruthless Aggression feud, of course. But this gripping conclusion and the hugely physical shifts both put in on the night are definitely worth your time, and it almost washes away those strange memories of Shane getting his balls zapped. Almost. Number 2, Beth Phoenix and Molina go for it at One Night Stand. And speaking of violent Ruthless Aggression contests that have been largely slept on for way too long, the One Night Stand pay-per-view once again delivered the underappreciated goods back in 2008. This time, no ladders were necessary. Instead, Beth Phoenix simply snapped Molina in half with her bare hands. Lita and Trish Stratus's main event fight on Raw in 2004 justifiably sits as one of the most important contests of not just the era, but women's wrestling in general. But this I Quit war between the Glamazon and the former MNM member also proved exactly what this next generation of talented women could do when given the opportunity to do more than dance around with Snoop Dogg. Everything from Phoenix gruesomely bending her flexible opponent's spine across her leg, to the star's ability to powerfully crawl her way out of trouble mid-hold, all highlighted Beth's unmatched physicality in between the ropes. But Molina also played the part of valiant babyface perfectly on the night, refusing to back down from her unstoppable adversary and cinching in her own array of delightfully tight submissions. This all set the stage for a horrific-looking glam slam submission hold finish, involving Molina again giving everything to keep from saying those match-ending words, only for Beth to transform her resilient enemy into the most disturbing small package you have ever witnessed. Look at that thing. If you've got a spare 10 minutes, then treat yourself to this incredible display of violence. And number 1, the sensational Royal Rumble 2005 commercial. Clearly inspired by the West Side Story musical, this ridiculously fun and sadly largely forgotten 2005 Royal Rumble commercial involves stars from both Raw and SmackDown singing about a very Royal Rumble. That's right, as they clicked, lip-synced, and mimed their way through a Vince McMahon nightmare. The likes of Rey Mysterio, Batista, Chris Jericho, Triple H, and so many more giving it their all in this gloriously cheesy piece of promotional material, while all donning various horrendous wigs, is rarely ever replayed or talked about almost 20 years on from its Broadway debut. Though the presence of Chris Benoit throughout may be one of the reasons WWE still refuses to really acknowledge the clip, which is obviously very understandable. The fact McMahon himself also signs off the bizarre 1-minute ad by shooting up out of bed and noting that's not the Rumble I had in mind, before the night he'd infamously rip both quads to shreds live on pay-per-view, is simply the icing on top of an incredible and talked about not nearly enough cake.
From all kinds of cage chaos to cinematic horrors, it is time to look at some quite bizarre and sometimes rather brilliant WWE matches that do not get spoken about that much anymore. I'm Gareth, you're watching WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 25 unique WWE matches nobody talks about. Number 25, the Lion's Den match. Borrowing from UFC's surging popularity in the late 1990s, the Lion's Den match was WWE's spin that, like several on this list, required specific types of wrestlers to be involved in order to get and keep it over. Set in a circular cage that left the wrestlers looking like trapped animals at the bottom of a fight pit, the contest gave the likes of Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, and Steve Blackman a showcase suited to their extra skill sets. And by extra skill sets, I mean their ability to kick ass for real. Matches such as the SummerSlam 1998 Shamrock Owen Hart maiden voyage for the gimmick added legitimacy with their MMA-inspired presentation. Unfortunately, the stipulation's niche appeal and WWE's eventual abandonment of these matches as the Attitude Era concluded ensured the Lion's Den remained a product of its time. Since then, the underground battles in NXT have tried and failed to ape the grit. Edge is not happy. And speaking of MMA in the world of wrestling, I want to know right now, who is your favorite ever MMA style performer in wrestling? Is it Ronda Rousey? A Ken Shamrock? You let me know in the comments right down below. Number 24, the Kennel from Hell match. 1999's Kennel from Hell match is more infamous than iconic, despite the audacious scope of the concept. A hybrid of a steel cage match and Hell in a Cell, with rabid dogs patrolling the ring. This unforgiven 1999 disaster saw Al Snow and Big Boss Man fail to overcome the match's bizarre logistics. Uncooperative animals and a poorly paced stipulation turned it into a laughingstock rather than an innovation, though the legacy lives on as a so bad it's good moment, thanks to relentless hazing from Mick Foley and latterly Snow's celebrating of its flaws. The disastrous execution will surely never be repeated, but more's the pity. I mean, a dog-free version that combines the two cages might have actually stood a chance, you know? Much like number 23, Punjabi Prison Match. The Punjabi Prison Match is an undeniably remarkable visual spectacle for pro wrestling, but that is often where the praise ends, sadly. First introduced at the Great American Bash 2006, and designed as a signature match for the great Khali, even though he ended up failing a wellness test and missing the original, awkward. The dual-layered bamboo cages were meant to evoke an esoteric mix of danger and tradition. Unfortunately, some convoluted double escape rules and obstructed sight lines left fans in the building and watching at home a bit confused and disengaged. It's been revived sparingly as a result, most recently to try anything to reheat Jinder Mahal and Randy Orton's WWE Championship rivalry February in 2017. Oh man, that was a time, wasn't it? Khali was back in the frame for that too. But like the big man himself, it remains something of a niche idea with more potential and promise than what occurred in the actual presentation. Number 22, Inferno Match. The Inferno Match epitomized the Attitude Era's obsession with shock, awe, and the never-ending programs featuring Kane and/or The Undertaker. The pair were in the first two Inferno matches in 1998 and 1999, with the Big Red Machine seeing his arm and foot set fire to, respectively, in the process. The younger Brother of Destruction was in the next, and of recording, last two, not managing to win his signature stip until a 2006 victory over Montel Vontavious Porter. I hear he hurts people now. It is an odd one to not really come up in conversation much anymore, considering how arresting the spectacle of a ring surrounded by flames actually is. I mean, look at it, that looks awesome. However, impracticality and reliance on spectacle over substance might be the reason why, and has certainly limited its shelf life in these less hedonistic times, at the genuine danger to performers and fans and the challenge of booking believable-looking finishes. And perhaps it's best left on the back burner this. Number 21, Buried Alive Match. The Buried Alive Match remains iconic for the showbiz quality of the grave sites, and using a consequence that sits within most people's darkest fears. Speaking of darkest fears, Mankind constantly had the measure of the dead man in 1996, and though he lost the first encounter, he escaped his inevitable fate and gathered other heels to help him bury Undertaker ahead of the character getting a repackage. It was shrewd booking. The sight of wrestlers being covered in dirt lent an almost mythological quality to the stipulation, and how much fans and the performers themselves should buy into it. This was crucial. When the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock worked matches with it in the years that followed, their credibility wasn't under threat for trying to avoid defeat. Of a bygone age, much like The Undertaker himself, the gimmick might only ever resurface like a hand sticking out of the ground when a character or story warrants it. We'll have to wait and see. Number 20, the Blindfold Match. The Blindfold Match often prioritized comedy and chaos over technical skill, much like myself, but demands immense working skill from the wrestlers to generate heat. Leave it to Jake the Snake Roberts and Rick Martel then, who made the company's first ever on-screen iteration of it at WrestleMania 7 such an overwhelming success story. Blinded in storylines, Roberts was at long last working on a level playing field, and put forth one of his last truly amazing babyface performances, conducting a crowd with little more than well-timed points and gestures towards his opponent. Understanding the assignment then, the audience that night set the tone for the rare future occurrences, and the gimmick tends not to have too much trouble getting the building going. People love them some blindfold matches. However, the lack of athleticism and actual, wrestling keeps the stipulation in the kitsch novelty column, something the market leader is alleged to have moved away from over the years. Number 19, the Boiler Room Brawl. The original Boiler Room Brawl was a dark and dingy war that exemplified a tone WWE were appropriately fumbling around in the dark for back in 1996. The SummerSlam bout was as much a vehicle to separate The Undertaker from Paul Bearer and give Mankind yet more credibility with yet another victory over the typically indestructible Dead Man. But the action was so claustrophobic, dingy, and atmospheric that most fans couldn't help but feel sympathetic for both. Years and a few hundreds of millions of dollars later, it was retooled for Backlash in 1999, and though there was more blood and the same level of violence, the contest actually suffered for how well lit it was. Now, those in the building for the inaugural one that night might not have agreed, but the original really did benefit as much from the theatre of the mind as what could actually be seen. Number 18, the Iron Circle Match. The 1999 Iron Circle Match showcased a unique twist to the traditional Parking Lot Brawl / Street Fight aesthetic. It was at July's Fully Loaded, where Ken Shamrock and Steve Blackman battled in a parking lot surrounded by cars and wrestlers with headlights illuminated illuminating the chaos. While this setting provided an unquestionably gritty atmosphere, the lack of in-ring action and the challenge of engaging a slightly bored live audience made it a one-and-done concept. Today, this stipulation is largely forgotten, overshadowed by more polished cinematic matches that were perfected and/or completely destroyed during the pandemic. Yep, still having nightmares about some of those matches. Number 17, the House of Horrors match. A Payback 2017 showdown between Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton remains one of WWE's most divisive cinematic experiments. Not least because it took place a full 3 years before the style was a necessity rather than a confused artistic choice. Featuring a spooky pre-recorded house segment followed by a live finish, it attempted to blur the line between horror and wrestling and largely failed at satisfying either side. Very good. Confusing execution and constant tonal inconsistency left fans baffled rather than thrilled. And once again, the Bray Wyatt character looked in danger of another creative betrayal. While cinematic matches have evolved since then, the House of Horrors is remembered more for its missteps than its partial innovation. And Randy Orton getting a fridge dropped on him, of course. Who could forget that? Number 16, the Crybaby Match. The In Your House 6 Crybaby match between Razor Ramon and 1-2-3 Kid ultimately had bigger ramifications than simply creating images of Sean Waltman sporting a nappy. Yep, there he is. A comedic stipulation added humiliation as a stakes layer, creating a memorable, albeit absurd, gimmick. While fun in small doses, its reliance on Vince McMahon's juvenile humor made it a product of a very creatively confused time, and alienated the fans and wrestlers alike. As buzzed as Click Pals Waltman and Scott Hall were to be working together, they both knew they could do much cooler things, and thankfully they did. Number 15, Tuxedo Match. In a Tuxedo Match, competitors win by stripping their opponent down to their underwear. Yep, it is not missed. Often reserved for comedy segments or non-wrestler brawls, this stipulation, dished out by WWE using the late great Howard Finkel on more than one occasion, provided light-hearted filler at best and no-joke comedy at worst. Where would such a stipulation really sit in present-day products, though? I mean, there may be a place for it in the right context or with specific characters, but so much of what made Tuxedo Matches work was the pantomime shame the heels appeared to suffer under the bright lights. That emotional resonance has changed, and in the case of the major promotions, has been shifted off to the side completely to stop wrestlers having to portray it. It's difficult to imagine it returning anytime soon then, as it is anybody calling for its comeback. So let's just leave this one in the past, yeah? Okay. Number 14, the First Blood Match. Launched and used multiple times by WWE at the height of the Attitude Era, the First Blood Match was an active impossibility for the majority of the intervening years. Winning required making your opponent bleed their own blood, with Stone Cold Steve Austin at the center of the first rollout to showcase the intensity and put the stipulation in front of the hottest crowds possible. They were always hot for Austin. But the gimmick stood in direct opposition to a no-blood policy that was in place within the company from the late 2000s onwards. That stance has definitely softened over the last couple of years, but at this point the company would probably rather seek forgiveness rather than permission as pertains to excessive claret. Outright promoting it ahead of time still feels like something the market leader would rather avoid in 2025. If you're having fun learning about some of the crazy WWE matches that really don't get talked about that much, then wait till you hear this, folks. You can watch more WhatCulture Wrestling videos each and every day by tapping that subscribe button right down below. Number 13, the Hardcore Evening Gown Match. WWE couldn't do much wrong in mid-2000, but it nonetheless fumbled around in the creative dark until it found something. This peculiar hybrid, infamously contested between Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe at that year's King of the Ring, combined Vince McMahon's yuck tasting comedy with nonsensical pro wrestling absurdity. Great. The Stooges fought in evening gowns while using weapons, leaning heavily into the supposed comedy of the premise over the in-ring action. While entertaining to some for its sheer ridiculousness, the stipulation thankfully feels too outlandish and problematic for today's modern and more polished presentation. Yep, do not bring this one back ever. Number 12, Coal Miners Glove Match. A technicality and curio more than anything else. The Coal Miners Glove Match makes it in here by virtue of its continued place on the spin the wheel, make the deal prop that has a place on NXT's Halloween Halloween Havoc shows. You know the one. That it's there, even just as a punchline, is tribute to the legacy it left. The ostensibly dangerous stipulation was popular in some southern territories, before a brief WCW run out for the 1992 Havoc pay-per-view bout between Jake Roberts and Sting. It's a loaded glove on a pole. No more, no less. That is it. And while its simplicity made it accessible once upon a time, the limited stakes and predictable format in the present day results in the match feeling more antiquated than some of the more elaborate setups available on the mighty wheel. Spin that thing! Number 11, Raw Bowl. Airing on the first Raw of 1996, the Raw Bowl match paired WWE with American football with a football-themed tag team contest. That was, at very least, as credible as an XFL clash. Wrestlers donned football jerseys and paint. Commentary dealt incessantly and almost exclusively in puns and wordplay. The refs were umpires, and the canvas was even decked out to look a bit like a pitch. Yeah, a bit. Football, baby. Though not the real football, obviously. While it was a fun and inoffensive experiment for the time, the concept lacked longevity by its nature, was virtually free of any stakes, and stayed put as a quirky one-off that's rarely revisited or discussed in modern WWE. Number 10, Dungeon Match. The Dungeon Match is simultaneously a completely of-the-time Attitude Era stipulation, a wrestling purist's dream, and a spectacle now literally impossible to replicate. Taking place in the legendary Hart family dungeon basement, this match between Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock at Fully Loaded 1998 was steeped in authenticity despite the presence of just enough WWE production to make it viable. The basement's low ceilings and unforgiving surfaces made it an atmospheric, gritty affair, where submissions and jockeying for any dominance whatsoever was the central goal. The one-off nature of the match meant that, over time, it would serve to exist as a historical artifact rather than a concept with lasting appeal. Wrestling today thrives on larger-than-life spectacle, and the Dungeon Match's intimate brutality just feels like a relic of a bygone era, celebrated in retrospect but unlikely to return. It's a shame too, because can you imagine unleashing a gunter in one of these? I can hear it already. Number 9, the Empty Arena Match. Poached from Memphis following a well-regarded Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler brawl, the Empty Arena Match was a rare spectacle until 2020 made it an unpleasant norm. Away from the enforced circumstances brought upon by the pandemic, the violent set to silence was popularized in WWE by Mankind and The Rock's halftime heat encounter during 1999's Super Bowl Sunday edition of The C-Show. A critical and commercial success, the pair were hilarious, piercing any potential silliness with punchline promos that leaned into how comical the concept really was. Two goats just doing goat things. It is a strange match in practice, more than a great one, to be honest though. While captivating in small doses, the lack of fan interaction can make the big moments feel lifeless rather than dramatic, and there's little narrative reason to book one beyond particularly extreme circumstances. Number 8, the Parking Lot Brawl. Though not quite as intense as the Iron Circle, nor can anything be as intense as a fight between Steve Blackman and Ken Shamrock, the Parking Lot Brawl remains a setting that allows for gritty cinematic violence. Eddie Guerrero and John Cena were two that suited the environment in 2003, because, like the performers themselves, it blended real-world influences with wrestling's necessary theatricality. Despite the chaotic energy, the concept's execution often relies on heavy pre-planning, mitigating the anything-can-happen feel a backstage brawl of any kind is supposed to foster. And the more WWE shifted to PG, the more the Parking Lot Brawl became a rarity. I mean, it would be interesting to see how they handle one today, though. Kevin Owens would have a field day. Number 7, Hair versus Hair Match. The Hair versus Hair Match confirms high stakes with the historic element of humiliation, though it could do with a new example to illustrate it at its peak. Infamously used in the Battle of the Billionaires at WrestleMania 23, Bobby Lashley and Umaga were proxies for Donald Trump and Vince McMahon, respectively, drawing a record-smashing buy rate for the show of shows in the process. The stipulation thrives on personal vendettas, but has fallen out of favor due to its reliance on participants willing to alter their appearance, or for that matter, the removal of societal societal shame around baldness. It's more than fine to be part of the bald squad, folks. We have jackets. It's still occasionally revived, but is no longer a marquee attraction or guaranteed draw. Number 6, the Beat the Clock Challenge. Not to be confused with one-on-one Beat the Clocks that act as deciders between two challengers. The night-long version of the stipulation made for great television when there were multiple challengers for titles and/or other particular prizes. The challenge added much-needed urgency to matches as wrestlers competed to win in the shortest time, rather than simply getting the victory within the traditional allocated television spot. There's something exciting about seeing a little stopwatch on screen too. In recent years though, the show-long version has seemingly been shelved. Boo! Once a creative way to build tension, it's now used sparingly as a novelty rather than as an episode's entire modus operandi. Number 5, Championship Scramble. Introduced for Unforgiven 2008, which is now somehow 17 years ago, as a format that was complicated by design thanks to the supposed incompetence of then General Manager Mike Adamle. The Championship Scramble allowed titles to change hands multiple occasions during a timed multi-man match. The 3 versions of it took place on one pay-per-view without feeling like overkill was at very least an advert for the long-standing possibilities. But it disappeared from view in the immediate aftermath of the otherwise indifferent September Supercard. While undoubtedly intriguing on paper, its slightly convoluted format and lack of long-term significance led to its quick retirement. Now there are fond memories of it as a bold experiment that allowed for novelty scenarios such as temporary WWE champions and a race for falls air of drama that has been borrowed for NXT's Iron Survivor post-2022, but the specific stipulation wasn't one that stuck around long enough to refine its potential. Number 4, the Barbed Wire Steel Cage Match. Though it might sound like the preserve of ECW or FMW, the Barbed Wire Steel Cage Match is something of a collector's item that, until very recently, was almost entirely the work of WWE. Alas, though the idea took brutality to another level, the practical application was less devastating in execution. JBL and the Big Show's No Way Out WWE Championship match required a creative finish to engineer Bradshaw's escape, but only because the top rim of the cage boasted the barbs. Otherwise, it was a standard mesh offering, really. And while the inherent danger and departure from WWE's mainstream style has kept this stipulation out of regular rotation, it's realistically no more dangerous than any other plunder war. Never was this clearer than during the most prominent 2024 iteration of the stipulation. Adam Copeland was seriously injured wrestling Malachi Black, but only when attempting a splash through the table rather than anything to do with the actual gimmick. What a silly cope. Number 3, the Dumpster Match. The Dumpster Match was popularized by the New Age Outlaws, Cactus Jack, and Terry Funk, after Billy Gunn and the Road Dogs sent the Hardcore Legends flying off of the Monday Night Raw stage en route to their tag team title match at WrestleMania 14. A slightly more unique upgrade on the coffin match. The visual was more captivating and the weapon more dangerous. It being WWE, however, a clean finish was too much to ask. The babyfaces won the belt using an illegal dumpster, forcing a rematch and reset of the status quo the next night. Yay. The stipulation has subsequently only been used 3 more times over the 3 decades since, including a 2024 rollout when Michin defeated Chelsea Green on a Trashville, Tennessee edition of SmackDown. I actually had a lot of fun with that match. Number 2, the Gulf of Mexico Match. The Gulf of Mexico Match was a quirky 2008 ECW one-off where CM Punk and Chavo Guerrero battled to throw their opponent into the drink. While memorable for its absurdity, the stipulation's logistical challenges and lack of practicality have kept it from being revived. The latter half of the 2000s was hardly an era of zero talent protection, but battling out into bodies of open water may not pass risk assessment for the promotion or performers in the 2020s. All that said, there's been times where they have served as suitable battlegrounds. Davey Boy Smith tried to drown Shawn Michaels after he'd been chilling with friends in Kuwait in 1996. Bob Holly and Al Snow famously battled into the Mississippi River in 1990, and Akira Tozawa tried in vain to claim the 24/7 title from R-Truth before ostensibly being eaten by a shark on yet another pitiful 2020 edition of Monday Night Raw. Dark times. Dark, dark times. Number 1, Body Slam Match / Challenge. For a contest impressed with lore attached to the very first WrestleMania, the humble but timeless body slam being the deciding move has rarely been trotted out, despite WWE's long-held and well-deserved Land of the Giants reputation. The move separated Andre the Giant and Big John Studd at the inaugural WrestleMania, and was used to try and get Lex Luger over in 1993 as a Hulk Hogan replacement opposite Yokozuna. But as wrestling moved forward, this blast from the past was forced to stay put. Far from historical footnotes though, both had differing types of pageantry around them. Andre won a bag of cash for his efforts and was distributing the wealth to the Madison Square Garden faithfuls before Bobby Heenan ripped the money from his hands. Meanwhile, Luger's USS Intrepid toppling of the then WWE champion was one of the highlights of a commercial and creative down cycle. Promotion doesn't always trump product, but in both cases, the marketing definitely made the moments.
From forgotten legends proving they can still go at the highest of levels, to less remembered entries in some of the finest programs we've ever had the honor of witnessing unfold. Each of these squared circle performances deserves to be celebrated far more than they currently are. I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 great wrestling performances no one ever talks about. Number 10, Big Show vs. Sheamus, Hell in a Cell 2012. By the time Paul White was well into his second decade performing under the WWE banner, the former Giant had become a 7-foot punching bag for much of the fanbase. Though Big Show undoubtedly still held some value as a bona fide sight to behold, his matches rarely lit arenas on fire, and were quickly overshadowed by whatever else was going on at the time. Yet, seemingly determined to prove he could still bring something to the table at the top of the card, Hell in a Cell 2012 provided Show with his chance to do just that. Matching the always physical Sheamus shot for shot and throwing himself around the ring like a man half his size, the Man Mountain provided the World Heavyweight Champion with his toughest challenge to date. So much so that after evading a third bro kick and catching the champ flush on the jaw with a sweetly timed knockout punch, Show became the World Champion for the second time to the sound of a shock to their core Phillips Arena. There's an argument to be made that White still is yet to top this jaw-dropping coronation. Over to you, AEW. Number 9, Chris Jericho vs. Triple H, Fully Loaded 2000. In the first case of two stars taking part in so many memorable matches that some are always going to get lost in the shuffle, here we have one of the finest last man standing encounters WWE have ever brought to their audience. Chris Jericho and Triple H would obviously go on to main event WrestleMania 18, battle inside of Hell in a Cell, and even take part in one of the most shocking unexpected title changes in Raw history before either of those big time battles. However, when it comes to their out-and-out best war between the ropes, the pair's Fully Loaded 2000 fight is head and shoulders above the rest. Y2J in particular proved he deserved his spot at the top of the card in this hard-hitting clash, playing the undeniable babyface with aplomb in the face of a despicable Helmsley Stephanie McMahon unit. The sight of a bloodied and almost beaten Game clawing himself back up to beat the 10 count as Jericho sold a back body drop through the announce desk like he'd just been murdered sent the crowd into a frenzy and established Jericho as a main event star of tomorrow. Number 8, Luke Harper vs. Dolph Ziggler, TLC 2014. He may have brilliantly proven just what level of talent WWE had at their disposal all along by the time he popped up in AEW, but history will still always show that the late Brody Lee was infuriatingly underutilized during his time in Vinnie Mac's company. Yeah, there was actually a time when it looked like the then Luke Harper was being given an opportunity to showcase how strong a singles player he could be. During this 2014-15 spell, the former Wyatt family member even picked up his first Intercontinental title, setting the stage nicely for a rematch between himself and Dolph Ziggler at the TLC pay-per-view. It was here where Harper exhibited precisely what he was all about. This largely uncelebrated skirmish started hot and refused to lose steam for the duration of its runtime, with Harper hurling himself at the challenger like a cruiserweight and nearly breaking Ziggles in half with a powerbomb onto a damn ladder. This savage and inventive display, even in defeat, should have opened the door for big things going forward for Harper, but he was ultimately thrown back into Wyatt-centric units for the remainder of his time in WWE. Number 7, Wade Barrett vs Daniel Bryan, SummerSlam 2011. Though Wade Barrett was unquestionably at the center of his fair share of memorable moments during his WWE career, the fierce Brit didn't have as many truly top-class one-on-one showings in between the ropes as you'd think. Sure, he was part of some excellent multi-man conflicts, but Barrett rarely stole the show when locking horns with one single sparring partner. There was one largely forgotten example of the former Nexus leader absolutely delivering the goods in singles competition, however, and it came during a bout with his one-time ally Daniel Bryan. In the wake of Bryan picking up the victory in that year's SmackDown Money in the Bank match, the two collided at SummerSlam in a last-minute addition to the card, clearly looking to make a statement on the summer stage. And not deterred by a limp crowd, Barrett provided the perfect and often violent foil for D-Bry's explosive offense. He even walked away with the victory, ending the underrated bout with a nasty diving clothesline to a Bryan caught on the top rope and particularly sickening wasteland. Still not quite as cool as a bullhammer though. Number 6, The Revival vs American Alpha, NXT 2016. Things may have come to a spluttering end for FTR in the closing stages of their time with their previous employers. But there was a time when the duo were heralded as the greatest thing to happen to the company's tag team scene in years. Frequently outstanding showings in their many bouts against DIY in particular eventually led to that compelling program understandably being the one the duo were best known for. But it was their prior feud with another unit that put them on the map, and arguably produced one of the finest and most underrated TV matches in the brand's history. Coming after two outrageously brilliant contests at TakeOver Dallas and The End, a bout against American Alpha on NXT's weekly show raised the bar once again. This time the two teams would put on an unrivaled TV 2 out of 3 falls clinic. But the Revival specifically raised their game to a whole new level here, coming from behind to retain their NXT Tag Team Championships via stunning closing stretch, which saw the two pulverizing Chad Gable with a now big rig on the apron. Number 5, Mankind vs Hunter Hearst Helmsley, SummerSlam 1997. Once again, we stumble upon another largely overlooked treat from an eventually legendary wrestling feud. And this specific top-class performance also involves Triple H standing on the other side of the ring once more. Years before the vicious rivals would wreck each other in iconic street fights and Hell in a Cell bouts, Mankind and Hunter Hearst Helmsley met inside of a steel cage at SummerSlam 1997. Here, Trips was exposed to a truly unhinged Mick Foley, highlighted by the Untamed Star's use of a truly chilling piledriver early on. Putting it all on the line for our entertainment as only Foley can, the future Hall of Famer also took a devastating superplex from the top of the blue cage and a cage door to the skull from China, which would have knocked most human beings senseless there and then. This willingness to put his body through hell made the moment a beaten and outnumbered Mankind escape the structure first. A truly underappreciated highlight of Foley's career. Number 4, Emma vs Asuka, TakeOver London. If you need a refresher on precisely why NXT's fans were initially tentatively excited about the prospect of the now Tennille Dashwood returning to the main roster in 2015, we give you Emma's insanely underrated showdown with the Empress of Tomorrow at 2015's TakeOver London. It must be said that in the lead up to this clash, Emma had become something of a jobber to the next generation of rising stars in NXT, falling to the likes of Bayley, Carmella, and Charlotte Flair on the brand. But that still did not stop her from putting in a remarkable shift in what was only the second TakeOver match of Asuka's WWE career at that point, holding absolutely nothing back. Emma connected with intense dropkicks, launched her rival into next week, and even found time to execute some devious heel offense in the form of some heat-seeking slaps to the face. Knowing the job she was there to do though, Emma also made Asuka look like $1,000,000, selling the newcomer's spinning heel kick to the face like she'd just been sledgehammered in the skull. Number 3, Bret Hart vs the British Bulldog in Your House 5 Seasons Beatings 1995. When the names Bret Hart and British Bulldog are thrown at the average wrestling fan, most of their minds will likely wander off to the pair's all-time classic at SummerSlam in 1992. But that was not the only time these two 90s megastars and Hart family members put on a masterclass together under the WWE banner. 3 years on from their summer showpiece bout, Hart, now the WWE champion, put his belt on the line against a heel bulldog at In Your House 5 season's beatings. No doubt benefiting from not recovering from a drug binge before this rematch against the Hitman, Bulldog physically dominated Hart for much of the fight, and looks mighty impressive doing it. Yet the star of the show was the champ on this occasion, desperately fighting back from the brink through a crimson mask, no less, to outmaneuver the stronger man and roll up the Brit for the win. Looking back, perhaps this dramatically charged bout even tops the aforementioned Wembley Wonder. But don't say it too loud. Number 2, Bray Wyatt with Roman Reigns versus the League of Nations, Raw 2016. Whisper it, but once upon a time, Bray Wyatt had the whole world in his hands. Then WWE decided to have him dress up as Sister Abigail and eventually become a demon clown who talks to hand puppets. Before the Fireflies hit the fan, however, Wyatt appeared to be on the cusp of something quite special once WrestleMania 32 was in the rear view mirror. Teaming with the new WWE champion Roman Reigns to fend off the laughingstock villains that were the League of Nations a few weeks removed from the Show of Shows, Wyatt seemed like a man transformed, drinking in the adulation from the crowd as an apparent face. The Eater of Worlds stormed around the ring, blasting anything that moved and orchestrating those in attendance like a star who'd been the company's leading light for years. This crowd-popping performance capped off with a sweetly timed gun gesture as Reigns nailed Sheamus with a spear. Was sadly a bittersweet event in the end though. Wyatt would get hurt not long after, and when he finally did return, this babyface direction was swiftly forgotten about in favor of his stale heel cult leader shtick. Number 1, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat vs Chris Jericho, Backlash 2009. During his prime, few stars held a candle to the absolute master of his craft that was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Yet the star who set the world on fire in the 80s and early 90s was at a very different stage in his career by the time WWE and Chris Jericho came calling for him at Mania 25. Rather unexpectedly though, a 56-year-old Steamboat looked like he hadn't missed a step in said Legends vs Y2J handicap match. So WWE asked the wrestling icon to stick around for one last singles bout at Backlash against Jericho. Taking things up a few notches once he got a few more ring minutes under his belt, it's often forgotten just how easily the former NWA World Heavyweight Champion slipped back into one-on-one singles action, putting the modern roster to shame within a matter of minutes. Steamboat wrestled with the vigor and energy of a man half his age, arm dragging, performing crossbodies to the outside, and belly-to-back suplexing his opponent like he'd never left. This losing effort may have only been a fleeting reminder of his talents, but it was still better than it had any right to be.
There is too much negativity in the world. We're all moaning and groaning on social media because this happened or something else didn't, and damn it, we've got to stop being negative Nancys and become positive Petes. Let's do it right now. Because hello, I am Simon from WhatCulture. Please do subscribe, it's good for what ails ya. This is 10 incredible WWE moments nobody ever talks about. Number 10, the forgotten Kurt Angle routine. During the Attitude Era, the World Wrestling Federation could be genuinely funny. Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Kurt Angle could make you laugh out loud. It was wonderful. Made you feel good. The Olympic gold medalist knew how to ham it up, and his whole goody two-shoes but also an idiot routine was brilliant. Especially because no matter how stupid he was, you knew nobody was more legit. It was the perfect balance. Let's not pretend that Angle wasn't a wrestling savant either, as he got so damn good so fast. But while he was learning the ropes and how to work for TV, Vince McMahon told Kurt to continually stop mid-match, get on the mic, and just rip on the fans. It was great. He often picked his moment when he was getting booed, which made it even better, like he was totally horrified by this reaction, and the absolute peak came on SmackDown in November 1999. Because when this happened again as Kurt Angle took on Gangrel, he told the audience the fact they had chosen a vampire over him was a crime. And I tell you this, somebody needs to start doing it again very soon. Number 9, Kurt Angle. Again, because amazingly, he was even better than you thought. Yep. When you break it down, the man could basically do it all to an elite level. This was even the case with elements he rarely got to experience, like the squash match. Because seriously, when Angle was doing the Gold Medal Invitational Challenge in 2005 and taking on all comers, a young Roderick Strong marched to the ring, and my word, Kurt wrecked him. This wasn't a huge shock because Angle was a genuine fighter, but after Strong slapped him, the man with the 3 eyes hit the go button. It's astonishing to watch in real time. It's like he forgot what wrestling was. The German suplex he delivers is also death, and the lariat he hits after that, Roddy must have owed him money. If you'd never seen Angle before, this would have sold you on him instantly too. He really is just one of the best ever. Number 8, Razor Ramon of the 1-2-3 Kid versus Diesel and Shawn Michaels. There's so many incidents between these four, it's impossible to keep track, which is why so many of their best moments have been lost to the passages of time. This one happened all the way back in 1994 on Never Talked About Show, WWF Action Zone, where we had this tag, and my word, they went all out. They also flipped the standard format on its head because it's Razor Ramon who takes the beating, allowing the smaller 1-2-3 Kid to get the hot tag. But Sean Waltman is so good, he basically shows you a window into what grappling is going to be in 20 years. You also get this top miscommunication spot between Shawn Michaels and Diesel as the big man gets super kicked by accident, and you could not time such things better. I do believe it's perfect. You can almost hear them saying follow that as they walk through the curtain, and yeah, I get it. Whatever motivated them on this night, they went out there and they totally smashed it. Number 7, the last hour of Survivor Series 2018. So that sounds weird, right? Why are we talking about 60 minutes from a random WWE pay-per-view? Well, I'm gonna tell you. It starts with Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair, who must have had a bee in their bonnet about something, because they walked to the ring before having a super violent match, and it is mesmerizing. The sheer intent behind every strike is phenomenal, and the idea that either could win is there constantly. We don't highlight this enough. And right after that too, you go into Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan. Yep, one of the very best big man, little man contests you're likely to see. This is a masterpiece. Bryan had wanted this for ages, so just threw himself into it, and some of the shots Brock takes. My word. If he likes you, you can just do whatever the hell you want. Daniel's comeback should also be taught in every wrestling school across the world. Despite the fact it was never going to happen, you actually start to think the yes man can do it. A work of art. The fact it was the main event made it even better because when the referee counts the 3 to announce the Brock win, the Beast doesn't look pleased at all. He looks shell-shocked, which is the last thing we see as the show ends. These 2 matches are absolutely excellent. Number 6, Jim Ross is a decent heel. Not that he really wanted to be. Good old JR has often mentioned how he just wanted to be a commentator to elevate other talent, but Vince McMahon was insistent. If he came up with an idea for his right-hand man, it was happening. While most of these were hit and miss, and him having to announce the fake Razor Ramon and Diesel was awful, Ross is really quite good at it. He's clearly speaking from the heart and saying how ridiculous the situation is, and that McMahon is a tyrant with no morals, especially as in 1994 Vince didn't renew JR's contract as he was suffering with Bell's palsy. I mean, that is just horrible. If you want to call this his hard times promo, I get it, but it's something totally looked past these days, because yeah, minutes later we got made-up wrestlers, which pissed off the entire audience because they've been duped. That is the number 1 rule. Never make your crowd the butt of the joke. Number 5, Mantar. That's right, I said it. It had to be said. Now this isn't a huge surprise coming from me because I love goofy wrestling. It's for life. I'm going to be dead one day, so I'd like to enjoy the silly stuff, and sports entertainment is often great at that. Thing is, with Mantar, it's a little different. It's still ridiculous because look at this outfit. I don't even know what that is, and even in 2023, I'm not sure if in kayfabe he was actually half man or half beast, or just thought he was. It was never explained. Thing is, while history has told us that his wrestling also sucked, it didn't. Instead of the slow, plodding dullard, you get an absolute monster that was rather dynamic. I'm not kidding. I mean, go back to May 1995 and the squash match he had with Sonny Rogers. Mantar sprints at this guy, picks him up, and just rags him into Tina the Turnbuckle before hurling Sonny halfway across the ring. Dare I say it, it rocks. Tor also had a mean suplex game, and his press slam into falling slam finish was awesome. If you did that today, you would definitely get a reaction. So, there you go. Mantar is better than you remember. We've put it to bed. Number 4, Steve Austin and Terry Funk tease a dream brawl. Shotgun Saturday Night was another WWF show we don't talk about, mostly because it kind of failed. It was meant to be a more adult program for the promotion, and while this helped when the Attitude Era was good to go, in 1997 it was mostly just Denise that had some really good moments. This was one of those. Steve Austin had joined the commentary team for one night as Terry Funk cut a promo, mostly because we were in Texas. As Stone Cold was still very much in that I wanna be a heel mode, he was raging when the Funker was done, Who the hell was this guy? It was mostly because Terry had promised to win the Royal Rumble, which was an insult to the Rattlesnake, as he intended to compete in that too. This is just how he was in the late 90s. All he really said as well was, he'll be over the top rope if I'm in there, but the delivery was so aggressive, instantly idiots like me got pumped. I mean, who didn't want to see these two go at it? Steve agreed and stormed to the ring where Funk slapped him, and when the strikes flew, man, it rocked. Funk has ever sold these like gunshots, and I tell ya, if you like some realism in your wrestling, it's right here. It's a shame this didn't go anywhere, but still, it was just so awesome to watch. Number 3, the Capital Punishment pay-per-view. Yep, I know. What the flub are we talking about? Because when this is brought up, most people want to talk about the fact that R-Truth was in the main event, which was great, by the way, because R-Truth is the man. But moving away from that, this card was stacked. CM Punk and Rey Mysterio carried on their long rivalry, and like ever, it was just top stuff. Punk would hurl Rey around like a child before Mysterio would explode back like a wrestler possessed. And because the mutual respect is clearly high, they go out of their way to make the other one look good. Randy Orton versus Christian is similar because they had the same sort of chemistry, and just kept coming up with ways to make their program more interesting. Even Kofi Kingston and Dolph Ziggler in the opener decide they're going to go full speed. How anybody watched this and didn't see future stars, I don't know. And sure, yeah, the rest of Capital Punishment is kind of just there, but still. 3 matches of this caliber? Ain't nothing wrong with that. Number 2, the original Doink the Clown. So I am to blame as much as anyone for this, because I make a lot of jokes about Doink. It's only because by the end it had become ridiculous. Everybody and their mother had taken a turn as Doink. When you go back to round 1 though, my word. Played by Matt Bourne, he decided clowns are kind of terrifying all things considered, so channeled Stephen King's It and made his version totally uncomfortable to watch. His facial and body language was just so off-putting. Something was not right with this guy. This translated to the ring too, which you can see when he took on Marty Jannetty in a 2 out of 3 Falls match on Raw in 1993. It was just the psychological aspect of the whole thing. Who was this dude? Why did he dress this way? And why aren't we getting any answers? Made it better. Sadly, Bourne was riddled with personal issues and was eventually let go, but if that hadn't have happened, I tell ya, today we would be talking about Doink very differently. Number 1, Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles from TLC 2018. So, who wants some hyperbole? Me too. Sometimes I do think to myself that when Styles and Bryan clashed at this pay-per-view, they were able to produce one of the best work matches in WWE history. I mean it. It didn't come as a huge surprise because they do exactly what you assume they would, but it's so well put together that it soon becomes a wonderful game of chess. 2 technicians picking each other apart and trying to set the ultimate trap. It's amazing. They're then reversing the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, the surprise roll-up like it's nothing, and it's just smoother than my head. Yes, because you can't see me, I'm bald. The Yes Man also had become the planet's WWE champion here, which was such a good character, and we all know the deal with the Phenomenal One. He's such a likable babyface, so you have that too. It's yet another window into how to make wrestling look as realistic as possible, and we just don't rave about this enough. Once again, I'm going to call it a work of art. That's right, I said it again.